How can you and this week we've had the family summer camp here at Amaravati. We've had all these children living in the retreat center, and this is, I think, about our 5th or 6th year that we've provided this family summer camp. Attempt to try to provide for the education and souls or minds of young children whose parents are Buddhists. Because we realize that these Sunday afternoon talks, adults like them, but children find them a bit boring. So we had a little more kind of different approach for the children's summer camp. But the subject for today's talk is materialism and idealism. I think this is a rather good thing to talk about at this time, and this is the news of the day with the kind of failures of the communist system in the Soviet Union and the end of a kind of era of idealism, because we can see that so much of a political ideology of the past 100 years, democratic systems and socialism, communism, this is one function of our mind, to be able to produce images or ideals of how things should be, how to produce a plan of a society that we would like to have in the future, where there is this democracy, where everyone has a measure of equality, equal rights, and freedom. And we can see in the Western world, say here in Britain or Western European countries and the United States, that this idealism, this democratic idealism, has provided us with a society that in one way lets us do pretty much what we want. We have, let's say, we don't feel particularly oppressed by the governmental system. We do have by the political system. But then, because even though we have what we call democratic society, the actual attitude, general attitude, and the ambience of the society is based on material values. So that the idea of having, trying to live for the high standard of living and being able to get what you want, to be able to have as much pleasure and the time and freedom to enjoy and get all kinds of material objects and material wealth, or just powers and free time, holidays, rights that we demand for ourselves in these democratic societies. And then the result we also see is not a very satisfactory one, because what oppresses us is not the government or even the society itself, but our own wrong views, our own fears and doubts. Our negativity tends to oppress our minds. We find ourselves haunted and obsessed with negative thoughts and worries and anxieties, self-criticisms, blame, and that, so that the oppression that we experience, say here in Britain, is something that we produce ourselves. Of course, this is a generalization. I'm sure there are cases where one is justifiably oppressed by somebody else. But generally speaking, the system is a fairly benevolent one. It tries to not oppress the population. Idealism, then, if forced on us, is a tyranny. It's even though the ideals of communism are, one can agree with many of their objects, It isn't their goal or their aim, I think, is objectionable to anyone, really. It's the means that they use, because they're using the tyrannical means to try to attain a goal that would be ideal, or a complete kind of equality or sharing of wealth, where there's no class domination, or where every individual in the society has the same rights and privileges. And of course that is an ideal that we can incline toward and appreciate. But actually the daily life experience, the existence of living on planet Earth, living with other human beings in a country as pleasant as this one, as England, still we find so much anguish and despair, neurotic fears, emotional problems, mental breakdowns, addictions, and so forth, oppressing the minds of our youth, not to mention older or mature members of the society. I always like to think that without, say, a proper understanding of our relationship as an individual human being to the universe we live in, then it's not possible to find any real happiness in the world. And some people think that's just one of those Buddhist kind of wet blankets that you throw out. I remember going to Wat Suan Mok in southern Thailand, Buddhadasa, and this was when I was still a layman, and I was working in Bangkok, and I decided to go down and visit the famous monk Buddhadasa Bhikkhu in southern Thailand. Went there, and then he called this spiritual theater, in which all these kind of themes and paintings and different things were presented in artistic ways to try to stimulate a reflective mind. And one of them was this kind of ecstatic figure, something like this one over here, kind of big-bellied kind of radiant being that says, "Oh joy to know there's no happiness in the world." And at that time I was quite bewildered by such a statement, I must admit. Because joy and happiness were not clearly defined. I mean, what was the difference between joy and happiness? It seemed like my whole conditioning for my life was to seek happiness, to try to find happiness in the world, and that there was something wrong with you if you were not happy. That happiness was our right, and that we should, if we were normal, well-adjusted, quote, well-adjusted, unquote, citizens of the United States, that we would find happiness as our right. And because we weren't happy, it probably meant there's something kind of wrong with me. There may be some a screw missing, or something wasn't quite up to par, really. And so that this was a constant worry of that since we felt obliged, that it was really necessary to be happy, and that was our right, then being unhappy was taken very personally. Attempts to be happy, though, trying to seek happiness. Many of us spent a great deal of time, put forth an enormous amount of effort seeking happiness in various forms, ways of having fun, having a good time, getting all the things you wanted, having adventures, romances, excitements, doing all the fun things of life, only to find out how empty and meaningless and confusing and depressing it all becomes. As somebody once told me, there's nothing more boring than continuous excitement. It's exhausting. So to just seek a stimulating company or interesting hobbies or adventures and romances led to a state of of intense boredom and depression and hopelessness. So obviously happiness, as I saw happiness in those early days, was something that you couldn't really maintain. You could have brief moments, like flashes or moments where you felt happy, but they were merely flashes. You couldn't kind of sustain them for very long, and then you drifted back into the worries, the self-consciousness, the sense of despair, the self-criticisms, the endless kind of complaints and blaming and gossip and that of the worldly life. And yet I remember feeling definitely that there was somehow some place or eventually one would find a place or attain some level of consciousness in which this kind of negativity had dissolved and one could abide in more of a serenity of the heart, peace of mind. Idealism, then, is a rather marvelous function of our mind. Not to put it down as something, to give it, to talk about it as if it were harmful or dangerous or deluding, because our ability to think and create in our mind ideal images is quite a miraculous gift. When you start contemplating, thinking about that each one of us in this room has the ability in any given moment to imagine the best. Now one experiment I did with this years ago, when I was, I think I was a monk about 2 or 3 years, and I went off to stay in this kind of mountainous area in northeast Thailand. And so I thought I would experiment with these different kind of concentration practices. So I read this kind of description of developing meditation on images of light in your mind. So since I can do this very easily, I can easily kind of visualize lights, I decided to do this. So I thought, what color do I really want to develop? I wanted to do a color, a light that had some color to it. Now in those days I was very fond of green. So I used to sit on the top of this kind of high hill in the afternoons, and I would just develop this inner light on the color green. And of course it was, I would just create it at will. And I could imagine, I could close my eyes, and I could bring this image of light, this green light. I could make it quite small, or I could enlarge it. And then I began to try to get it as the most beautiful shade of green that I could possibly imagine. So then I kept developing the sense of this color that is so utterly beautiful. There couldn't be a more beautiful green in the whole universe. So then my mind would start thinking, well, how do you know this green that you're making is the most beautiful? Maybe there's a more beautiful green somewhere else. And then it's gone, you see. As soon as you doubt it, get caught up in thinking about it in a negative way or doubting it, then of course it's gone. But as long as you actually sustain it with that act of will, bringing it into existence as a mental image, and creating it into anything you want it to be, like the most beautiful green light in the whole universe. And then suddenly I saw that it was the most beautiful light in the most beautiful color of green, most beautiful green light in the whole universe. Because I made it that way. So then that gave me a sense of the kind of miracle of the mind. But then I tended to dismiss this ability as just kind of playing games with oneself. That the real practice was penetrating suffering, and looking at suffering and the First Noble Truth, and then to realize and have the insights through the contemplation of the Four Noble Truths. But at that time I did realize that the human mind is such that you can create whatever you want. If you are willing to, if you get beyond just the kind of negative, doubting, insecure tendencies of the mind. Because with the samatha meditations, whenever you start doubting it, and think, oh, it's not real, it's just playing games, of course then it's lost. Or whenever any kind of form of negation or negative or doubt or wavering, the limit or the sign or the image that you create as a mental image is gone. It depends solely on believing in it totally and sustaining it, and keep sustaining it and building it and reflecting on it until it begins to kind of hold on its own. It becomes where you can actually kind of bring it into any situation, project it into at any time or any place, whatever you're doing. This is possible to do. And what that does is because to do that you have to commit yourself totally to believing it, to thinking positively about it, to accepting it, believing it, creating it in very positive ways, affirming it and confirming it and making it work for you. Well, the same with say that's with an image of light. Then apply that also to, say, ideals such as love or universal love or compassion, loving kindness, joyousness. Then we have the Brahma Viharas as examples in the Buddhist system. The mudita or metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha as the kind of divine qualities or radiant qualities of in the universe. The Brahma in the Buddhist use of Brahma always implies radiant states of mind of purity, pure and radiant qualities. So metta or loving kindness, karuna, which is compassion, mudita, which is a joyousness, and the upekkha, which is equanimity or serenity, means that these are sustained as ideas in the mind, as ways of really getting to investigate and know and to identify what that is really like, to the quality of metta or loving kindness. Not just a sentiment or a nice thought that passes by, but actually a sustained reflection through affirmation, through concentration, through really knowing what it's like to feel, say, non-aversion, non-hatred, a sense of well-being and goodwill toward oneself and all other beings, whatever they might be, good, evil, high, low, your friends, enemies, the whole lot, isn't it? Metta is non-discriminatory. It's not spreading more metta to one side than the other. There's no quality or quantity. It's all equal. Metta to all beings. Well, that's quite a wonderful thing that we can actually imagine that as a possibility, and to be able to create mental, with our minds, that mental state in which we have, let go of the negative states of mind, all the criticisms, the faults, the flaws, the blames, the worries, the doubts, anxieties, the jealousies, and the feelings of being offended and so forth, all have dropped away to abide in that level of loving kindness for all beings, for all sentient beings. Now, all sentient beings, it's even in the metta practice where one is a loving kindness for all unseen sentient beings, as well as all seen ones we can look at and actually observe, or the ones that we think exist but can't see or don't know for sure. So that what you're doing with this practice is developing a totally positive attitude toward all possibilities, all existence, and the totality of being, in which the negative states of mind cannot grab hold of that moment. Because to have metta for all sentient beings, at that moment, you cannot, any thought, any negative feeling is also a sentient being of some sort, isn't it? It's a condition that arises and ceases. So that one is developing a total kind of patient acceptance of well-being and goodwill towards every possibility, from a kind of brief flickering mental state to a total universal system. Well, that's quite a miracle that we can actually contemplate in that way. And I find that a marvelous ability that I have. I'm sure everyone else has that ability. And I didn't think this up. I didn't make this up. This has been going on for thousands of years, being taught as Buddhism. But sometimes we don't realize the miraculousness of our own existence. We get stuck in the negative kind of banality of daily life. It's just poor little old me, and this the chip on the china cup, and the annoying way the neighbors never kind of clean up their back garden, or things like this can obsess our minds, and just the most kind of miserable mental states of dreariness, and grey dreariness of the mind can, of course, block us off from the miracle that we're very much involved with, which is conscious experience in an individual form. Now, the human being then we are some kind of creature that is in a very peculiar position, because we can't kind of find any real satisfaction in drifting back towards more kind of animality. We can't just find we can't be content with a good meal and just the instinctual drives of our bodies in the animal world. I mean, we are always trying to get beyond that, and so civilization and the attempts to, and the refinements of aesthetic refinements that we create, and the religious aspirations and spiritual realizations, mystical experiences, a sense of mystery, bring us to that awareness that we are that this is a temporary journey that we're involved in. It's a peregrination. It is merely a kind of, maybe a purgatory. When I was a Christian, I used to talk about purgatory, and I think, well, that's what I'm experiencing right now. This being a human being is like living in purgatory, because you're on fire, aren't you, with a body that's hot, and and you're always dealing with obstacles and difficulties, and there always seems to be so much kind of anguish and despair, so much to be concerned about. So the problem of being self-conscious, of having to stand out and be somebody in a group, where you can be criticized or made fun of, where you can be attacked or brutalized or tortured. This is quite a difficult place to be in many ways, being a human being.
So purgatory then is like a purgation, isn't it? It means to purify, to cleanse. And this is what I found very much as a kind of experience of my life as a Buddhist monk. It is a mental and spiritual cleansing of the mind that I've been involved in over the past 25 years. Because when I first ordained as a monk, my mind was, even though it was altruistic, and it inclined toward the good, wanted to realize the truth, it had good intentions, but the whole kind of basic conditioning of it was so fraught with so many difficult attitudes about myself and the people I lived with and the society I lived in. Everything had become complicated for me. Life was not just easy come, easy go. Everything was fraught with difficulty, loaded, explosive, dangerous. There was endless kind of worries and anxieties that you carry around with you on holidays, and find yourself, in the midst of a pleasant scene, trying to have a good time, and then suddenly completely kind of shattered through just thinking one negative thought that brought back a whole kind of oppressive mental framework. This was brought home to me one day when I was living when I was in the Peace Corps, and I was sent off to this very kind of tropical paradise in North Borneo, west the east coast. There's a place called Semporna. And Semporna was a little coastal town in which there was a smuggling port in the Celebes Sea to the Philippines and Indonesia. So, but it was a kind of exciting place to be and very picturesque. And we used to have there were several Chinese millionaires who used to throw these kind of grand parties for us, and they'd bring special cooks from Hong Kong to prepare these fantastic banquets of Chinese delicacies, Napoleon brandy and champagne, and life was just, a gala party. And we have speedboat, water skiing, skim diving, snorkeling, all the rest, in this incredibly beautiful equatorial place. But then while I was there 2 years, I suffered enormously, not due to any of the physical things around me, but to the mental states that could take over my mind. And I became very much, and the thing that brought it home so clearly was that in some way, before I could always blame it on something else. But where I was, I realized that there was, life was really quite enjoyable. There was nobody really to blame for anything, and yet these very kind of difficult fears, kind of nameless fears and worries, and a kind of level of great negativity could just take over my mind in the midst of a quite pleasant and enjoyable scene. And I used to wonder why. Why does this happen? Why can't I just not have this happen? Why can't I just thoroughly enjoy everything that's so enjoyable and so available and there to be enjoyed, and yet mentally many times this oppressive would take over my conscious experience. Why is that? Why does that happen to us? And that is, isn't it? That's that's due to the conditioning of the mind. The general attitudes we have towards ourselves, that maybe we don't intentionally have them. It wasn't that I had any intention to have these moods or these feelings. In fact, I intended not to have them. But yet they were would suddenly occur and take over the mind and make you quite helpless, quite depressed by it. And so several years later I went off to Thailand and became a monk, began to really investigate all this. This negativity, this dimness of the heart, this doubting, wavering, unconfidence, the worry, the tendency to sink into a kind of sea of worries about nothing really, but just one was so accustomed to worrying that's the way the mind easily just went when there's nothing else to do, nothing to occupy your time, then you sink into this realm of worry. It would just be kind of automatic. And that is the result of a mind that has developed in a society. And that is the result of a mind that has developed in a society based on ideals and material values, on a strong sense of one's self, and where the miracle of life has not been raised up as a reflection, but where the whole emphasis has been placed on the concepts and the views, the attitudes you have about yourself. What you think you are or should be or shouldn't be became that which tended to dominate conscious experience. It would affect it. The self-consciousness, the ego, in Buddhist terms of sakkaya ditthi, a self-view, self-consciousness, conceit or pride or ego. These words convey a conditioned attitude of mind towards yourself. And that was based on, say, on the family I was born into, on the whole kind of cultural background, education, that instills in you your attitude and self-view. And that self-view, of course, if it's based on comparisons, on competitions, on the critical faculty, even if you have a fairly kind of positive attitude towards yourself, it still takes you to a sense of despair, because that whole function of mind is not meant to be something that we cling to, identify with. Our discriminative faculties, the views, the opinions, the memories, the ability to perceive or create perception, all these are a function of the mind, to be understood, to be examined, to be known for what they are, but not to be attached to, not to identify yourself, because that's what self-consciousness amounts to, isn't it? Self-consciousness is the sense of I am somebody independent, somebody who's this person, this being here with, and then that brings forth all kinds of, maybe I'm not as good as somebody else, or maybe I'm arrogant, I think I'm better than everyone else, or maybe I have a view that there's something wrong with me, or I'm abnormal, or I can imagine myself being much better than the way I perceive myself. I could create a view of myself as a perfect kind of human being, male human being, some ideal form, and then feel quite weak and helpless and lost in the realities of life as I experience it. we do that, we oftentimes feel always disappointed with the people around us. No, how many times have you been disappointed with a husband or wife or friends or close associates or children or parents or whatever? Because we say, well, they're only human. Being only human means that we don't expect very much from them. And then we say, well, I'm only human, which is a kind of justification for allowing anything, any kind of weakness. So we can idealize, apotheosize somebody into a kind of how they should be, what a mother or father should be, or a lover, or a mate, or a partner, or whatever, what they should be, what we want, is kind of ideal relationships, and then feel quite disappointed with the realities of a relationship. Feel quite embittered or disillusioned because realities of living with some other person is never really ideal. It has maybe moments where it reaches a peak of where we feel it's ideal, but it can't stay on that peak experience. And then we feel disappointed, disillusioned, blaming ourselves or blaming the other person. Negativity takes over the mind. So that ability to create an ideal, what is that about? Why do we do that? Why do we expect something to somebody? Why would we want maybe a religious teacher to live up to our ideal? With some of the disrobings that have taken place recently, lay people have told me they've been so disappointed because some of the members of the Sangha that have disrobed have disappointed them because they think, well, here, these monks, nuns, these are not going to disappoint me. They're these pure beings who will I can trust at last. Somebody who lives up to these noble goals and who will not disappoint me by proving that they have faults or weaknesses, or they want to disrobe. Disrobing implies also a sense of, maybe the holy life isn't possible. Maybe we can't really do it. But we need ideals, don't we? We need more kind of archetypes, role models, examples, perfect forms, lovely images to look to. But we must recognize that that's all they are. That's what they are. They're ideals. And therefore, that's fair enough. It's a miracle of the mind that we can create an ideal. But we must, with wisdom and right understanding, recognize that it is an ideal. It's not a person. It's not a real thing in the sense of an ongoing, permanent experience. You can't expect a flesh and blood, conscious creature to be an ideal. Just like you can't expect me to be this marble image sitting above me. I can sit for so long like a marble image, but not very long. But that one's been doing it about 300 years. That's an ideal, isn't it? And the marble image is an ideal Buddha. So we know that. It is as an aesthetic form. It's a creation of the human mind. And it has its beauty. And it inspires us. But we recognize that it is merely that. It's not the way life is for each one of us as a conscious, sensory creature on this planet. So this is a reflection on the way things are, that the ideals we need to have ideals. We don't want to live in a world of cynicism and pessimism and mediocrity, and just say everything is just meaningless and useless, and go to the extreme of just denial and rejection of life. But recognize the miracles of our mind as miracles and their limitation also. And not to expect them to be more than what they can be. Now the aim of the holy life, the religious life, spiritual journey, is for ultimate realization, which is beyond the ideal, beyond the conditioned, beyond the miraculous, which is not, say, beyond in the sense of cut off, but it contains, it's what is all-embracing. It is the whole, where all the different pieces fit in, where there's room for every possibility, every permutation, every aberration, every variation, in all possibilities, all forms, mental, physical, in the totality, and in the one, there is everything fits. You can't compare totality with anything, because you've taken your ability to create a perception to its ultimate point. In totality, and everything is contained within it, so you can't compare it with anything else. And that's where the metta practice begins, really, is when we have that sense of total acceptance, kindness, non-aversion to everything. And that is to be developed as a practice. And that means that isn't as easy as it sounds. Because even though we can get sentimental about it and a bit smarmy and wet, but it's not based on just thinking nice thoughts about people when you're in a good mood. It is really getting to a very basic place where the discriminative mind that has no meaning anymore, where it doesn't kind of dominate and take over your awareness and influence you, where you can just be a conscious and fully sensitive, receptive being, and yet totally accepting of the conditions and manifestations that you're experiencing, no matter how beautiful or how ugly, how pleasant or painful, how ordinary or mediocre, how lovely or hideous they might be. Because this sense of totality, everything fits into it. Everything belongs. There's nothing that shouldn't be there. And then we abide in the state of non-aversion. And yet it's intelligent. It's not stupid. It's not clouded, unclear thinking. It's taking your consciousness to a point where it's total, and where the discriminative function, the dwelling on the detail and comparing one thing with another, is no longer operating, or no longer necessary, or no longer the intention of your mind. Now this is a balance for the other, for our discriminative abilities. Now I say in the Western society, here in Britain, people have been very much conditioned into high levels of discrimination. Modern education, modern values, materialism, the ideals of our society, democratic ideals, all these create a sense of influence our discriminative mind. We can always see how things should be, and the way things are. Then we find oftentimes it's not the way they should be. Life isn't what it should be. I'm not what I should be. You're not what you should be. Britain isn't what it should be. Better than this, isn't it? Britain should be better off than it is now. Europeans, Americans, they should be. And we can, what's wrong with the British? That they are perfect. We can look at the politicians, blame them, and so on, which we do, very good at. But that's the discriminative mind, which has its use and its purpose, but it needs to have the balance of the other. Otherwise, it turns on us, doesn't it? We become stuck in this kind of negative soup, a kind of grey porridge, a kind of bleakness of the mind, where that is the result of developing our discriminative faculties without developing our spiritual aspiration in any way. So you notice people that have a spiritual goal have a sense of balance. The religious life or spiritual aspiration puts us in touch, allows us to touch into or connect into universality or oneness or totality, or in the Buddhist terms, in the unconditioned or the amatadhamma, the deathless reality. It's only that we can't tune into that through discrimination. That's why you can't find it as through thinking about it. You can't find God or find ultimate reality or unity or love through thinking about it and discriminating, because the discriminative conditions, and then we have various preferences and biases, prejudices, and that influence those particular perceptions. But when all that has been let go of, relinquished, and abandoned, not through aversion or to it, but through understanding it, then we connect into universality, or the unconditioned, or deathless reality. And that's what the religious goal is, isn't it, of any religion really, is that kind of realization, direct realization. And that, of course, allows the discriminative function to be a friend rather than an enemy. We begin to realize our intelligence, our ability to think and discriminate, rather than it being something that persecutes us and oppresses our conscious experience. It actually is something we use to manifest beautiful ideas, to be able to respond, to act, to deal with life's experiences in a skillful and compassionate way. So that there's nothing really wrong, is there? Ultimately, it's perfect right now. But the conditioned mind takes perfection only as an ideal, not as a realization. So the realization of perfection is not through believing that there is something that's perfect, or believing that it's perfect right now, but in realizing the way of things, the true way of things, which is, in Buddhist terms, what we call the Dhamma, or the way it is, the truth of the way it is. Now, in Buddhist practice, then, we do this kind of reflection that I'm doing this afternoon for you. Is something we need to do quite often. We need to remind ourselves. That's what, say in a monastic routine, you have morning puja, evening puja. You have a whole lifestyle of conventions, discipline, and so forth that are used for that recollection, to remind you of ultimate reality, of what remind you of that is your goal, that is what you're here to realize. And that realization to examine and investigate Dhamma until you have that realization, you know for sure. The realization is a direct, insightful knowing, profound knowing of reality, which is here and now. It's not having studied all about philosophy and read the Abhidhamma Abhidhamma Pitaka, and figured it all out through the perceptions of Abhidhamma or various other high-level methods of perceptions and concepts and imagery, but through a real direct realization in a moment of non-attachment, of no self. Not a denial of self, but when there's no self-consciousness, there's no sense of me or mine. The mind is bright, it's intelligent, consciousness is operating, sensitivity is there, but there is no grasping of a perception of me or mine. That whole kind of tendency and habit has been relinquished for that moment. That is true serenity. That is peace. Because as soon as the old bugbears of self-view come back in, then you're off into the samsara again, zooming around, worrying about what people think of you and this and that, and what will happen to you when you get old, and why life has been so unjust, and on and on and on and on into the endless whirlpool, maelstrom of the conditioned self-view. So anatta isn't to be seen as a kind of soullessness and a denial of self, but as a realization of totality, where there's no need to be anybody. There's no blind spot which takes you off into becoming somebody, or having to become, or anybody, or having to become something, or having to get rid of something. This winter's retreat, I kept kind of trying to get the community to contemplate that, to do 2 months of silent meditation with an attitude that there was nothing to do, nowhere to go. Some people found that very difficult because they immediately assume that I don't have to do anything and I don't have to go anywhere. So it's not to try to convince yourself you're nobody, but in opening the mind up to that realization of non-attachment, emptiness, no self, desirelessness, where there is the purity of the heart. The heart is pure, lustrous, bright. There's intelligence, pure intelligence. Not stupid, not blank. It's not denied anything. It's not rejecting anything. It's a total acceptance. And I find in community life, say in the monastery here, the more the monks and nuns train themselves to accept, to try to create, to try to develop an attitude of total acceptance of everybody in the community the way they are. This allows a sense of trust, and where we can have a few moments maybe in our lives to be able to reflect and not feel that we have to become something or get rid of something. Because the obsessions of Western mentality are such that we immediately, when we feel guilty if we aren't doing something, even meditation becomes another compulsive habit we develop, something we have to do to get a result in the future. But when we appreciate just the ability to be conscious, to create at will what is worth creating, to be able to abide in the purity of the heart and trust in it, and not be just caught up in the obsessive habits that we've acquired before we did realize the Dhamma or the truth of the way it is. Then the ideals, maybe communism. So whatever works, whatever is fair and of benefit, then those are the conventions we'll be able to appreciate. But even if we create the perfect political system in our brain, which I think what Karl Marx, he tried to create the perfect political system while he was sitting in the British Museum. You can create this ideal political system, quite intelligent, logical system, and there's, one doesn't disagree with it as an ideal. But that's all it is. It's like trying to make you all into marble Buddha rupas. Even though that'd be nice if you all could sit still for 300 years and look as patient and as beautiful as that image, that would be very nice. We realize none of us could do it. And that if I forced you to do it, what would happen? You'd have to rebel and kill me, wouldn't you? You'd have to ask me to resign as abbot of Amravati. And you'd have a coup. Because I'm trying to shove an ideal on top of you that you can't ever possibly hope to achieve. Because you're not ideals in that sense of something that is perfect in a perfect thing. The perfection you really are is say, universal, deathless perfection, not physical perfection, not an ideal in your mind. In that you can create an ideal of perfection, but a realization of perfection is through mindfulness, not through willpower or somebody imposing an ideal and oppressing that idea, pushing that ideal onto you. So contemplate what I've been reflecting upon this afternoon is to bring into your daily life a sense of try to see the wonder of just of the ordinariness of your life. If you're mindful, you begin to see the wonders around you, the miracles that are happening, but which you may be oblivious to because of just the habitual tendencies of your conditioned mind as it takes over and blocks off any real sensitivity to this present moment. So that the way of the Buddha is a way of liberation, freedom, understanding, and to realize the perfection of the Dhamma. And in the sense of the triple gem, the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, these are like jewels or perfect diamonds or that which is perfectly clear and beautiful and is strong and indestructible. And that's what when we contemplate and understand Dhamma in the right way, that is our realization, that is our true nature. So I offer this for your reflection for this afternoon, and now we can have a short break. I think they have some tea or something to drink, and then in a few minutes we can open the remaining time up for questions, answers, or discussion.